Some discoveries don't just get added to history books, they force us to rewrite them. Textbooks give us a timeline that feels solid, almost inevitable. Simple tools, then better tools. Small settlements, then cities. Ignorance, then understanding. Moving in one direction. But every few decades, something surfaces from the sea, or the sand, or a forgotten archive that doesn't fit that line at all. Today we're looking at 5 of those moments. A machine too advanced for its century. A temple older than farming. A map that shouldn't have been possible. A pillar that refuses to rust. And stones too heavy for the tools we assume built them. Each one chips away at a small piece of the story we were told. By the end, you'll understand why so many historians now treat that timeline as a working draft, not a finished one. In 1900, a Greek sponge diver named Elias Stadiatis went down to a wreck near the island of Antikythera, expecting the usual haul: amphorae, broken pottery, maybe a few coins. Instead, his hand closed around something dense and strange, crusted in marine growth, that didn't feel like any cargo he'd handled before. It sat in storage for years, mostly overlooked, until a piece of it cracked open and someone noticed gear teeth inside. Real, cut bronze teeth, dozens of them, meshed together with a precision nobody expected from that era. Ancient Greek engineering, as far as historians knew, meant levers, pulleys, and simple ratios. Nothing that came close to true mechanical computation. But what researchers eventually reconstructed, using X-ray scans a full century after the wreck was found, was a device that modeled the movement of the sun, the moon, and the known planets. And even predicted the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. It took modern imaging technology just to understand a machine built with hand tools. And the part that stays with researchers isn't the mechanism itself. It's that only one has ever been found. If something this advanced existed, and was ordinary enough to end up as cargo on a routine trade ship, it likely wasn't unique. It was probably part of a tradition, one we've lost almost entirely. That question, how much knowledge simply didn't survive, becomes even more unsettling once you look past machines and start looking at cities. Because the next discovery doesn't just challenge what the ancients could build, it challenges why they started building at all. For decades, archaeologists worked from a clean sequence. Farming came first. Surplus food allowed people to settle. Settlement eventually allowed for temples and organized belief. Civilization, in other words, had to exist before religion could be organized at scale. Then, in the 1990s, excavation began on a hill in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, and the sequence started to break down. Workers uncovered massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some over 10 tons, carved with foxes, scorpions, and vultures, arranged in deliberate rings that clearly required coordinated planning and labor. When the site was finally dated, it came back at roughly 11,600 years old, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, 7,000 years older than the pyramids. Built well before pottery, before writing, before any evidence of organized farming in the region. And the people who built it left something even stranger behind. At some point, they buried it themselves, filling the enclosures with rubble and stone by hand. Nobody has a confirmed reason why. Some researchers suggest ritual closure. Others suggest it was meant to protect the site. What's clear is that a society without agriculture organized itself well enough to plan, carve, and construct something on this scale, which suggests belief and cooperation may have come first, not last. If the order of that story is wrong, it's worth asking what other assumptions about early civilization deserve a second look. One of those assumptions involves how far that civilization could actually see. In 1929, a librarian working through the archives of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul found a folded gazelle skin map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. The map showed the coastlines of West Africa and South America, with real accuracy for its time, likely compiled from older source charts, some of which no longer exist. Along the bottom edge, there's a landmass that some researchers have connected to Antarctica. It's worth being careful here, because this is one of the more contested claims in the list. Most historians argue the shape is more likely a distorted stretch of the South American coast, warped by the map projection methods common in that era. But a smaller group of researchers still argues the proportions line up too closely with Antarctica's coastline beneath the ice, a coastline that wasn't confirmed until sonar mapping in the 20th century. Nobody has settled this one, and that's the honest version of the story. Either way, the map proves something real. 16th century navigators had access to older source material, more detailed than anything we've recovered, which means there are charts and knowledge from that earlier period that simply haven't survived. Knowledge on paper is one thing. What ancient builders did with raw material is another question entirely. Take the iron pillar standing in Delhi, cast sometime around the 4th century. It's been outside for over 1,600 years, through monsoon season after monsoon season, and it still hasn't rusted in any meaningful way. This one isn't really a mystery of understanding. Modern metallurgists know exactly why it's held up. The iron contains a specific phosphorus content that reacts with humidity to form a thin, self-renewing layer called mesowite, which protects the surface from further corrosion. We understand the chemistry completely. What we don't fully understand is how 4th century smiths, without modern instruments, controlled that phosphorus ratio consistently enough to produce it on purpose. That kind of metallurgical control usually implies generations of testing, failure, and refinement, which means there was likely a whole body of ironworking knowledge in ancient India that never made it into any surviving record. The mystery isn't the pillar. It's everything that came before it that we'll never see. And that same gap between what survived and what was lost shows up again at Baalbek in modern Lebanon, where 3 stones sit in the foundation of a Roman-era temple complex, each weighing more than 800 tons. A 4th stone, never fully separated from the quarry bed nearby, is estimated at closer to 1,200 tons, heavier than most cranes in operation today can lift. Engineers have proposed several methods for how stones like this might have been moved, including timber rollers, sledges, and large coordinated labor teams working with counterweights. None of these explanations have reached full consensus, and that's worth saying plainly, because certainty here would be overselling it. What is agreed on is that moving stone at this scale required planning, manpower, and engineering knowledge well beyond what we typically credit to that period. Whether the exact method was rollers, ramps, or something we haven't considered yet, the stones themselves are proof that ancient builders solved logistical problems. Most modern engineers wouldn't attempt without heavy machinery. Look at these 5 discoveries together and a pattern starts to form, one that has less to do with individual genius and more to do with loss. A machine this precise implies a tradition of instrument making we no longer have access to. A temple this old implies a form of social organization that predates our model of civilization. A map this detailed implies source material that never survived. A pillar this resilient implies metallurgical knowledge passed down and eventually forgotten. Stones this massive imply engineering solutions we haven't fully reconstructed. None of this proves that ancient people were smarter than us. It suggests something simpler, and in some ways, more sobering. Knowledge doesn't move forward in a straight line. It gets discovered, refined, and sometimes lost entirely, only for later generations to rediscover fragments of it centuries afterward. So the real question isn't whether history is wrong, it's how much of it we're missing. Every one of these 5 discoveries survived by accident: a shipwreck, a buried hill, a forgotten archive, a pillar left standing, a quarry left unfinished. For everyone that survived, it's worth wondering how many didn't. Which of these 5 surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to keep digging into the parts of history that don't quite add up, subscribe, because there's more waiting to be found. Thank you for watching.